In the year 4000, while the biting winds of the Canadian wilderness swept across the frozen plains, stirring up whirlwinds of snow and ice. For centuries, this land had been locked in a harsh grip of cold, covering over all signs of a world that once was. But now, beneath the cracked, splintering ice sheets, ancient power was awakening. A loud, thunderous crack echoed through the silent tundra as a towering figure burst forth from its frozen tomb. Ice and snow shattered around it, sending shards flying into the frigid air. A massive T-Rex, its body covered in crystalline blue and white scales, shook itself free from its icy prison. It stood tall and powerful, its breath visible in the cold air as steam rose from its nostrils. This was no ordinary T-Rex. This was an alpha, the leader of a pack that had lain dormant for millennia. One by one, other T-Rexes emerged from the ice around it. Their scales, though not as bright as the alphas, shimmered in hues of green, brown, and grey. The alpha, towering over them, let out a deep, resonating roar that seemed to shake the very ground. It was a call of command, an order to move. The pack, recognizing the alpha's authority, quickly fell in line, following their leader as it began its slow, deliberate march southward. The alpha knew they were hungry, so they stopped at the river and had a quick salmon lunch. It was the first time they had eaten in years. With their bellies full, they continued to move south. The landscape around them was a frozen wasteland, but as the alpha led its pack forward, the ice began to give way to open fields, where patches of green struggled to break through the melting snow. It was a sight that stirred something in the ancient beasts. This land was new to them, yet somehow familiar. They moved cautiously at first, taking in the vastness of the plains around them. In the distance, movement caught the alpha's eye. A herd of wild bison grazed in the tall grasses that had managed to reclaim the land. The alpha stopped, watching the animals curiously. The bison, unaware of the threat, continued to feed, their massive forms plodding through the grass and leaving deep tracks in the mud. Nearby, a group of deer pranced gracefully, their heads jerking up now and then, ears twitching as they sensed something was amiss. The pack shifted restlessly, sensing prey for the first time in their new world. The younger Rexes growled softly, eyes fixed on the bison. But the alpha let out a low rumble, holding them back. This wasn't the time for hunting. They needed to keep moving, to explore this strange, thawed world that stretched endlessly before them. With a snort, the alpha turned away from the herd, leading the pack onward. The bison, noticing the giant predators retreating, stood still for a moment before returning to their grazing. The deer bounded away, disappearing into the tree line. The pack continued southward, moving through the fields with surprising speed despite their massive size. They crossed over rivers that had begun to thaw, their powerful legs breaking through patches of ice as they waded through. Each step brought them closer to something unfamiliar yet intriguing. As they pushed through a dense cluster of trees, the forest began to thin, and in the distance something new appeared on the horizon. Towering shapes, half hidden by mist and the shadows of dusk, rose up in front of them. The alpha paused, tilting its head as it regarded the scene before it. This wasn't like the forests or plains. This was something entirely different. Remnants of a city, crumbling and overgrown. The ruins of Toronto lay sprawled out in front of the pack, a ghostly reminder of humanity's once thriving world. Skyscrapers leaned precariously, their windows shattered, their once gleaming facades now covered in moss and vines. Crumbling bridges stretched over what used to be bustling streets, now littered with broken cars and debris. The alpha led its pack slowly into the city, its heavy footsteps echoing through the hollow shells of abandoned buildings. The Rexes moved cautiously, their keen eyes scanning the ruins for any signs of life. Occasionally, they would pass by the rusted remains of human machines, old trucks and buses half buried in rubble. The alpha nudged one with its snout, watching as the rusted metal crumpled under its weight. Deeper into the city, they stumbled upon something new, a long line of tanks positioned in the middle of what used to be a wide boulevard. Their once imposing barrels were now covered in dust and corrosion. The alpha approached one of the tanks, sniffing it curiously. The scent of oil and metal lingered faintly in the air, a ghostly reminder of humanity's failed efforts to defend itself. A younger T-Rex, braver than the others, snapped its jaws at one of the tanks, tearing off a piece of the hull with a screech of twisting metal. The noise reverberated through the city, causing a flock of birds to burst from the skeletal remains of a nearby office building, their wings flapping wildly. The pack watched them go, their eyes following the birds until they disappeared into the sky. The Alpha turned away from the tanks and continued onward, weaving through the remains of what had once been downtown Toronto. As they moved further into the city, they came across a massive structure, an old stadium, its roof partially collapsed, its walls overgrown with thick ivy and creepers. The Alpha stepped cautiously inside, its massive frame barely fitting through the entrance. Inside, the stadium was dark and eerie. Rows of seats stretched out before them, covered in moss and grime. In the center, where humans had once gathered to cheer and shout, there was nothing but silence and the slow drip of water from the damaged ceiling. The pack explored the stadium with fascination, their heavy footsteps causing the ground to vibrate slightly. A few of the Rexes sniffed at the broken remains of concession stands, while others peered curiously up at the high walls. Few bison had made this stadium their sanctuary. It was a place of echoes, a monument to a species that no longer roamed this land. After a while, the Alpha grew restless and led the pack out of the stadium, moving through the deserted streets once more. They passed by buildings covered in shattered glass, where reflections of their massive forms distorted eerily on the broken surfaces. Then, something caught the Alpha's eye, a large, partially submerged structure at the far end of the city, its silhouette distinct even in the fading light. As they approached, the Alpha saw it clearly, an old robot factory, the entrance covered in twisted metal and thick, thorny vines. The factory's walls were scarred by time, and massive mechanical arms lay rusting on the ground like fallen giants. The pack hesitated, sniffing the air. The scent of metal and decaying electronics was stronger here. The Alpha stepped forward, pushing through the tangle of vines that blocked the entrance. Inside, the factory was a graveyard of machinery. Broken robots, their eyes long dark, lay scattered across the floor. Conveyor belts covered in dust and grime wound their way through the massive space, leading to assembly lines that had once produced a small army of mechanical workers. The Alpha nudged one of the robots, its massive jaws clamping down on the machine's torso. It lifted it effortlessly and tossed it aside, the metal crumpling as it hit the wall. The noise echoed through the empty halls. The pack moved through the factory, exploring the strange metal contraptions with cautious curiosity. The Alpha paused near a large control panel, its glowing eyes studying the strange symbols and buttons. It growled softly, almost as if sensing the power these machines once held. But now, they were nothing but lifeless shells, abandoned by the humans who had created them. With a final glance around, the Alpha turned and led its pack out of the factory. They stepped back into the ruined city, the wind picking up and howling through the empty streets. The night was falling fast, casting long shadows over the wreckage. The pack of T-Rexes moved through the abandoned avenues, past the empty buildings and rusting vehicles. The Alpha raised its head, letting out a deep, resonating roar that echoed across the cityscape. It was a sound of triumph, of dominance. This world was theirs now, and they would explore every corner of it, claiming it for their own. Toronto, once a thriving human metropolis, now lay at the feet of ancient predators, its secrets and ruins waiting to be discovered. The pack moved southward, leaving behind the silent, crumbling city and venturing into a land that was only beginning to reveal itself to these ancient giants. The age of humans was over, and as the Alpha Rex led its pack further into this strange new world, one thing was clear: the reign of the dinosaurs had begun once more.